Hello, I'm Jesse Gillis. This is the program Now is the Time to Talk. Today's guest, Tom Mannion, State Rep out of Pelham.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you. So we're going to be talking about Defend the Guard, what's going on with Iran, and I wanted to open this up with something I had written and I spoke at when I lived in Pembroke at the town hall meeting. On the 11th of this month, we celebrated Veterans Day, a day to pay tribute to those who served and are currently serving, a day to, in quotes, honor Americans veterans for their patriotism, love of country, and willingness to serve and sacrifice for the common good. This day used to be known as Armistice Day. When passed in Congress in 1926, it was a day to recognize the end of the Great War, the resumption of peaceful relations with other nations, and the hope peace would never be severed again. It was an exercise in remembering the desire for perpetual peace through goodwill and mutual understanding between nations. We have forgotten this call. That language of Armistice Day changed in 1954, striking armistice and replacing it with the word veterans. It became a day to honor veterans and remember why we fight. Where is the desire for peace? You can only find it on the faces of the victims of war. I remember the first time looking into the name change and the background in Congress and the talks. World War I was a nightmare. Anybody participating in that. And it desires, we want peace to resolve the conflicts. Again, World War II, UN's created. It makes it a war crime to commit an act of aggression against another nation, to try and keep stability because the alternative is always worse.
Right. I mean, it's kind of part and parcel with the whole, like, we're no longer like just there for peace. We're no longer trying to strive for peace. We're trying to be like the world's police and enforce our will upon other nations. And it's kind of been that way since World War II, which was the last time we actually formally declared war.
Right.
So
that 1954 change, we were in the midst of the Korean War. At the end of it, we get into Vietnam, we get into Latin and South America, we get into what's going on in the Middle East. And I'm going to transition this over to what a declaration of war is. The point of Defend the Guard. If we have to send our troops overseas to combat, there should be a declaration of war, as you say.
Yep.
As you can read, you can find out for yourself, the last time we declared war was World War II.
Yes.
I'm going to focus on the one against Japan. This is Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. The next day, FDR goes to Congress and he asks for a declaration of war because it's the right thing to do. This is a joint resolution declaring that the state of war exists between the Imperial Government of Japan and the government of the people of the United States and making provisions to prosecute the same. Whereas the Imperial Government of Japan has committed unprovoked acts of war against the government and the people of the United States of America, therefore be it resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled that the state of war between the United States and the Imperial Government of Japan, which has thus been thrust upon the United States, is hereby formally declared, and the President is hereby authorized and directed to employ the entire naval and military forces of the United States and the resources of the government to carry on a war against the Imperial Government of Japan and to bring the conflict to a successful termination. All the resources of the country are hereby pledged by the Congress of the United States. That was 1941. By August 15th, 1945, Japan had surrendered. By September 2nd, they had signed a surrendered. Legally, this declaration of war didn't end until 1952 with the peace treaty. But we had military occupied them for a period of like 7-8 years, like 500,000 troops in the occupation of Japan. But that's a declaration of war, who we are fighting, what terminates it, what our purpose is. I'm going to skip forward to the AUMF of September 2001, the short version.
Yep.
That the President is authorized to use all, this is post 9/11. This is the attack on the World Trade Centers. And we are going to go to war against those who committed the act. That the President is authorized to use all necessary and appropriate force against those nations, organizations, or persons he determined planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11, 2001, or harbored such organizations or persons in order to prevent any future acts of international terrorism against the United States by such nations, organizations, or persons.
That's much more open-ended, to say the least.
Yeah.
At the time, there was only one nay vote against this because it was, I think, 2 days after 9/11 this passed. The issue here is it doesn't really label any specific targets. It allows it at the president's discretion that he deems was associated with. So it was used to go into 22 different countries, I believe, and bomb most of them and invade Afghanistan. It's been used as a justification for places that it had nothing to do with 9/11. Originally, like Yemen, for example, was a harbor for Al-Qaeda, and we had used it. The USS Cole was bombed there by Al-Qaeda leading up into 9/11, but then we used it to just pivot, and then we started attacking the enemies of Al-Qaeda, which was the Houthis, on behalf of the Saudis. This was also used as justification in Syria, which we now have one of the leaders of Al-Qaeda in Syria was also Al-Nusra, was rebranded, is now the leader of that. So that flies in the face of that authorization of use of military force. And it's still in effect, despite the fact that Osama bin Laden and Zarqawi and other top generals and leads of Al-Qaeda have been dead for decades.
Yeah. So people not born at the time can now be targets of assassinate or strikes against groups that weren't formed at the time. This is what authorizes many of the strikes that we have today.
Yes. Despite, it's very open-ended, but it is very specific about those responsible for 9/11. So it is.
Yeah.
And it's strange that they've. It's not strange. It's par for the course. This is what the founders warned about. That Madison himself said that we should not allow unrestrained power from the executive to just happen because they are the most prone for war and they're the most likely to take advantage of a weak legislative body and when the legislative body just hands a blank check over to them, they're going to use it. The executive is going to use something like this.
You have an army at your disposal.
Yep.
Our military,
Yep.
Navy, Army,
Yep.
Marines. So we invaded Afghanistan by October. I believe the Taliban government fell by December. This is 2001.
Yep.
But we occupied 2001 to 21 until the withdrawal. I want to make it a point because it was within 6 months that Bush made a comment on I forget who he was speaking to. This is President Bush at the time in regards to Osama bin Laden, finding him. This is 6 months later after, right? We only withdrew from Afghanistan in 2021. Who knows if he's hiding in some cave or not? We haven't heard from him in a long time. The idea of focusing on one person really indicates to me that people don't understand the scope of the mission. Terror is bigger than one person. He's just a person who's been marginalized. I don't know where he is. I really just don't spend that much time on him, to be honest with you. This is 6 months into the invasion of Afghanistan.
Yeah. It's insane. The entire purpose of the AUMF, the entire reason we had boots on the ground and then we chased all the way up towards Tora Bora, towards the Pakistan border, was finding this one guy. And he's already declaring, we don't know where he is. So what's the justification for us being there still? If we can't even hold true to the AUMF that they gave to you, President Bush, why are we committing lives to this and killing people for this?
At this point in time, they've already it's not only a war against Al-Qaeda, the Taliban too.
Yeah.
It doesn't...
Guilt by association for harboring them.
And so now we're going to free the people of Afghanistan from the Taliban.
Nation building.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so today, this is the 4th of March. We are a few days into strikes on Iran. The new administration, one of the campaigning things was no new wars. There's a meme out there with Vice President J.D. Vance saying, no more globalist wars.
Yep.
If you vote for Harris. But we've attacked 7 countries since the new administration took office, and this is the first president to bomb Nigeria, Iran, and Venezuela. Much of this is a continuation of the Biden administration. And one of the things about Defend the Guard and the constitutionality of wars, post 9/11 wars, is that the executive branch has just been waging war unconstitutionally. It doesn't matter what administration is. There is a entrenched power, people, money, corporations that want war, that desire it, that lobby for it. So one of the things, 620, this is a cost of war project. There's a couple others that count these things. We've been conducting hundreds of airstrikes all in 2025. We have about 160,000 U.S. troops deployed right now overseas, split throughout that specific region, the Middle East and Europe.
In Africa, in Nigeria. We were training coups in that area, and that entire region of Africa as well.
That was something that came up under the last administration, is that the U.S. has, overthrown 7 governments or helped install new leaders, destabilizing regions.
Say what you want about Matt Gaetz, but he did question a lot of the generals when they came before his committee back when he was still serving in Congress. And he grilled those generals, like, why do we have troops in Nigeria? And they're like, or it's like, well, they're, it's because of terrorism. They always say, like, terrorism, national security. You can't really go into details. It's like, well, they're Congress. They're the ones who declare war. You should be giving them the details. Like, even with the War Powers Resolution, you are required, the executive is required to give a report to Congress on anything that they do.
I remember watching those hearings. That's Representative Matt Gaetz, you'd say, grilling the AFRICOM commander about what's going on, what are we doing in Africa. And a couple of the operations, the big operations that we're doing, Operation Rough Rider, March to May of last year against the Houthis in Yemen, for the Houthis trying to stop what Israel is doing in Gaza, a direct response to what they're doing to the Palestinians. So we decided to go to war with the Houthis, and
the direct quote from Trump is back when we very first started bombing the Houthis, when we did the pivot from bombing al-Qaeda, it was to, quote, placate the Saudis, because the Saudis themselves have had problems with the Houthis on their southern flank. So this was a largely a foreign nation trying to push our hand into this conflict, where we had been bombing the enemy of the Houthis, which was the al-Qaeda, that was also operating in that same nation. Al-Qaeda were the people that attacked us on 9/11. They were the people that bombed the USS Cole, especially in Yemen. But we had to pivot because of our allies requested it.
This is when that Signalgate thing happened.
Yes.
This is when the apartment building was struck. There was 50 people or so, whether it was the wrong building or not. But the thing is, these civilians are being killed in all of these. We had strikes against ISIL in Iraq on March of last year. We hit our 100th airstrike against ISIL in Somalia. We've been continually bombing Somalia. ISIL, it's just happening. As Air Wars Dave DeCamp would talk about, it's the least covered thing that we're doing overseas.
But it's the longest bombing campaign in U.S. history. We've been bombing it since the end of 2001, continuously. Pretty much every year, something gets bombed in Somalia.
We had Operation Midnight Hammer against Iran last year, the surprise attack to take out their nuclear capabilities. And we'll come back to that this time around, what's being talked about. So we were targeting their nuclear sites. Again, all of these, I'm mentioning just the operations, kinetic strikes using our military, specifically air, some sea power. Where is the authorization? Article 2 is talked about, President's emergency, but these are like as if there's imminent threats to the American public.
A lot of people will misquote the War Powers Resolution, claiming that it gives the president unilateral authority to do these, but it does say in the War Powers Resolution that the president can only act if we are under imminent danger, or barring an authorization from Congress or a declaration of war. The only other case in which the president can act is if the United States or our assets are in imminent danger. And I would not say that any of these strikes that we've been doing are to prevent imminent danger.
No. The strikes against Nigeria, because there was a Christian genocide going on in the background. It's hard to hear these terms thrown out. Genocide, there's obvious genocides going on that are totally ignored, and then stuff like this, the Christian genocide in Nigeria. So we have to strike ISIL there. It must still be going on. I just don't understand. Operation Southern Spear, the drug boats, Caribbean. Hawkeye strike. This is against Syria. This is after the 2 National Guard troops
Yes.
were killed in Syria. We're not supposed to be in Syria. Why are we in Syria? Just like the recent base that was hit, Erbil in northern Iraq.
Yes. Yep.
What are we have doing with troops in Iraq?
They don't even want us there.
Hawkeye strike. This is absolute resolve. This is when we take out when we kidnap the Maduro, the president of Venezuela. I didn't list, like, I have to go into the arguments, the executive branch's lawyers for their arguments for their authorized use of Article 2, or if it's the AUMF protecting. But the whole thing is to be protecting the American public. But these are just strikes on designated target terrorists.
The justifications for anything to do with those drug boats was extremely weak. That's why they started using the term narco-terrorist, so that they can conflate the war on terror with also the war on drugs, and justify like blowing up boats that were, 1,000 miles off the U.S. coast, little tiny like outboard boats. There's no way they're going to make it to the U.S. coast whatsoever. Fentanyl doesn't come from Venezuela; it never has. It's barely a throughway for cocaine, and that cocaine does not come to the U.S. Cocaine that comes to the U.S. travels usually up the west coast of Mexico from Colombia. It just goes right up that way, and that's how it usually gets here. It's not going across the Gulf of the U.S. or the Gulf of America, Gulf of Mexico, whatever you want to call it. It's not coming from Venezuela. It was complete subterfuge and trying to justify actions just so that they can put a military fleet right off the coast. And even now, like, you'll get guys like Marco Rubio will admit it wasn't really about the drugs. It never really was. And now they're trying to like back argue that it's basically the U.S. was a contract enforcing a stolen oil rigs, and it's our oil. Like, we made contracts decades ago, and that's why we actually did it. It's like, then why did you lie in the first place? Like, why do you have to lie to us? How can we trust anything you say about any future operations all the way through to Iran? How do we trust anything you say? It's like, as a guy, I did, so going into 2024, I did vote for Donald Trump. I believed that the men around him were enough to prove that he or should have been the anti-war candidate, correct? Right. So you had Tulsi Gabbard was in his camp. She was famously anti-war. RFK, he was on Joe Rogan multiple times talking about being anti-war. Every time Vance was out campaigning, he was talking about the folly that was the Iraq War and a lot of the AUMF failures, these forever wars. And Vivek Ramaswamy was another one that was in his orbit that was talking about the waste of life. And he debated John Bolton and bodied him, in my opinion, in a debate about the failure of the global war on terror. And like these people were all in his orbit. And I was like, he has insulated himself from the neocons, in my opinion. It just didn't work out that way.
He was even, there was a consideration for Mike Pompeo again. What was that position?
It was, he was either going to be Secretary of State or SecDef. I can't remember. But they definitely, like, the internet rallied, in my opinion, and bullied that nomination off the table. Same with Nikki Haley. Like, the two of them were outright pushed away by the Trump administration, and I thought that was good. I thought Marco Rubio was a weak borderline. That guy's soft, and I was like, that's one of the weaker choices that he made. And then Pete Hegseth was... The one thing I'd say about Pete Hegseth is when Defend the Guard passed in New Hampshire the first time, Hegseth did say on Fox and Friends that he liked it, and he has never recanted that statement. But all the war pushing that he's been doing now and the propaganda is like maybe lose a lot of faith in the man.
Right. Switching back to Venezuela, if we looked at the DEA does the gang exist? Does DEA even recognize Tren de Araguas or whatever it's called?
I don't know. You mean as a narco-terrorist organization?
As a narco-terrorist, they're smuggling in.
As a threat to the U.S., I doubt it. Like the DEA and the Coast Guard, who intercept vessels all the time off our coast, none of those came from Venezuela. There was no report from either of them or Customs and Border Protection. None of them said that any fentanyl that comes into the United States is from Venezuela. This has been on record since we've been tracking fentanyl trafficking into the system or into the states. It's never been from there, but they use it as justification, right? And to me, when they first started saying that, I was fully aware. There's fentanyl, you can make it pretty much anywhere. It's like a factory thing you can make in a warehouse. And most of it was being made in Mexico, maybe tied back to China, and it would just shuttle across the border that way. And it's like, why would, if you were going to make fentanyl, why would you make it all the way down in Venezuela and truck it all the way up when you could just make it right over the border in Mexico and shuttle it across? It doesn't make any sense. It's not the same thing as like you need the climate for cocaine. And like you said, cocaine's been trafficked into the U.S. for decades and decades and decades.
And there's a sketchy past with the CIA in that drug smuggling. So
that's they got their funding. They got caught by the DEA flying into Miami, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
And so from here, it's obvious that the UN, it's violating international laws, these wars of aggression. It's violating the U.S. Constitution, and it's violating War Powers Resolution.
Mm-hmm.
So to defend the Guard, what can we do?
So in our limited capability, we do have the state militias, which are actually the backbone of a lot of our deployed forces downrange, especially in the Middle East. Every state has their own, by the Constitution, it was called the militia. Now it's called the National Guard. That serves two roles. One is if it becomes federalized under Title X, then it becomes part of the active army, but it has to be done so at the consent of the governor because they also serve the governor. They swear an oath to both. Defend the Guard states that we will not allow our governor to activate our Guard into Title X activation for the purposes of overseas combat without Congress first declaring war. All of this is fully constitutional. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 specifically outlines that Congress is exclusively granted the right to declare war. And they haven't done it since 1942. And so if they want to take our men and send them into Syria, they want to send them into Iran now, we want them to first do their job, Congress. And an AUMF we don't see as good enough in our eye. The founders didn't think of some way of just handing a blank check over to an executive that can use it however they choose. They want, exactly like you read, this is what we authorize the president to do. This is what we define as victory, and the Congress stands behind him. Not this, the president can do as he sees fit against whoever he thinks might be involved, et cetera, in perpetuity. That's not acceptable. A formal declaration of war is the power granted to Congress. We will not lower the bar further than that.
Right. So today we have the War Powers Resolution. The floor vote's going to happen. It's in the House right now. There's one in the Senate, one in the House, and they're currently still speaking. They're going to come up with a vote at some point because today is the 4th. And there's a couple of findings in there that point directly what Defend the Guard is based on. The following findings. 1. Congress has the sole power to declare war under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the United States Constitution. Congress has not declared war with respect to or provided specific statutory authorization for hostilities involving United States armed forces against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Section 5 of the War Powers Resolution states that any time the United States Armed Forces are engaged in hostilities outside the territory of the United States, its possessions and territories without a declaration of war or specific statutory authorization, such forces shall be moved by the President if Congress so directs.
Exactly.
Sticking to the Constitution, this bill is expected to fail.
Sadly.
This is for what's going on in Iran right now.
And what they'll do is instead of actually passing an authorization, they will say the failure of that, this is what happened with Venezuela, if I'm not mistaken, the failure of that is justification enough. Like, well, you didn't tell me I couldn't do it, so I'm going to do whatever I want. And that's a whole other level of unacceptable.
Yeah.
We're now at the point where we have to stop you instead of you need permission. That's completely backwards.
Yeah, it is entrenched. There is plenty of people in Congress that want war with Iran, but don't want their names tied to it. And they won't positively affirm this, but they desire that the Iranian regime fall. No one's speaking any good about the Iranian regime here.
No.
But that is not our war. That is not, you are willing to sacrifice our military members to achieve this. We have seen time and time again that aerial campaigns do not do it. That you need ground forces. This has been, again, it looks great. You bomb and you blow up buildings. It's great for publicity and theater because you're watching a sport from a TV, but that does not change anything on the ground, especially against a regime that has been preparing for this because they have been publicly noted. Bush, the axis of evil, 2002 in the
Yep.
speech. Iran, North Korea, and Iraq. Yeah. And watching Syria fall and Libya fall and Afghanistan fall and what it does to those countries. Don't forget Iraq.
To me, so as you mentioned, like these aerial campaigns aren't going to cut it, and the disaster that could occur is things that happened in Syria and things that happened in both Iraq and Libya, where a civil war breaks out, and then you move from like oppression that may be killing a few hundred people or whatever, it's horrible, to the order of magnitude in the hundreds of thousands of people dying over this civil war, sectarian violence, whatever it may happen. And Iran is, I always like to remind people, it is bigger than Iraq and Afghanistan combined in both land area and population.
Yeah.
And it has mixtures of races and different sects, religions and all that, unlike either of those two. And so the violence we witnessed in Iraq, where the Sunnis and Shias were going after each other, it's that but worse. And it has the worst features of both. It has dense urban areas, a lot like Iraq, and it has hard mountainous areas, a lot like Afghanistan.
Yeah.
If we were to put boots on the ground, it would be worse than both those conflicts combined.
I believe the Rand Corp already had their studies. This has been gamed out. We do not win these scenarios.
No.
I mean, the occupation, we'll get to that. I'm going to move on to, I wanted to say a couple of names and what they're saying, because there's a lot of press briefings right now from administrative officials. Rubio, Hegseth, Trump himself. The war in Vietnam is going well and will succeed. That's the Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara. He was the Secretary of Defense the entire time, until later had some regrets about his behavior and what he thought of Vietnam and what we were doing. We know where they are. They're in the area around Kirkuk and Baghdad, in east and west and south and north somewhat. That's Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld about the WMDs in Iraq. 5 days or 5 months, but it certainly isn't going to last longer. Rumsfeld again about the war with Iraq. No, that's someone else's business. Quagmire, I don't do quagmires. Before the invasion of Iraq. Iraq didn't end till 2011, and we had to go back 2014 against to fight ISIS.
Yep.
And even today, it's still on
there.
goes.
We were still there, and they haven't. Their version, their Congress has voted us to. They wanted us leaving their country for the past 5-6 years now. They've just been pushing that, saying you completed it. You destroyed ISIS, right? Multiple administrations have declared victory over ISIS. Why do we still have people in Al-Assad Air Base? We're allegedly drawing down there, but all we're doing is moving north, closer to the Iran border.
And the last quote, before we move on to what we're doing with Iran, simply stated, there is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. There is no doubt he is amassing them to use against our friends, against our allies, and against us. That is Vice President Dick Cheney addressing the VFW in 2002. I'm having trouble with these conversations about what's going on, war, with people that are alive but do not seem to remember that we were lied into these things, or why we were there to begin with. It's almost like weather. You just get sent, and there's no accountability. It just happens. You just get sent to these things.
Yeah, it's it's also frustrating talking to guys that have been there, like guys from that have deployed, and I see some chatter online, guys that have been to Iraq War veterans and stuff like that, and they're like, "Oh yeah, go get them," and it's just like, how do you not remember the failure that was the Iraq War and all the horrors and everything that occurred there? How do you think this is going to play out any differently? You're going to decapitate their religious leader and plunge the country into chaos potentially, and if it's anything like the other regions, when ISIS came to power, decapitating the strong power in the region leaves a power vacuum for psychopaths that will come in like warlords and recruit all of the lunatics to their side. And that's going to make that region much less safe.
It's hard. You almost have to not care about what was happening in the background, and then I don't know how you do support this. after what we've been through, what we've been going through continuously,
Yep.
actually, through Bush, Obama, and Trump, and then Biden again. And it continues.
It doesn't matter who's in there, and they always have their which different now than I think the previous administrations is. At least the previous administrations had a lie, and they sold that lie like through the news media. Like the weapons of mass destruction quoted in there multiple times. The Taliban are still hiding in the caves with potential Al-Qaeda members. We have to stay here. Syria was like, oh, they had nerve gas that they were gassing their people with. At least there was some justification. Our Congress didn't buy it. We didn't pass an AUMF for Syria, yet we put boots on the ground. With Iran, it's like radio silence.
Yeah.
When they first struck them last year, it was to bail Israel out of a mistake where they overcommitted and they were starting to get beat back by all those missiles that were bombarding into Tel Aviv. And we had to bail them out to save face for them. We strike the quote-unquote nuclear sites, and there's still a message on the White House website that says, make no mistake, we destroyed all their nuclear capabilities, and anything that says otherwise is fake news. So now, if we're bombing them and they're trying to say it's nukes, is the previous message a lie? Is this a lie? It's my theory they're both a lie.
Yeah.
There's no justification.
No, it's anything. It's almost like anything that will just. I don't know how to finish the sentence. It's just throwing it out there as if it doesn't matter, but just some justification.
Yep.
And so you're either with us or you're against us. So don't question your loyalty to us.
Exactly. I think what they may have learned from the Venezuela fiasco is that they can lie right to our face, or they can give us no real justification, and their allies will still be their allies, and they may lose a good chunk of their base. People that voted for them might no longer be so supportive. But they realize maybe we don't even need to give any justification, and the same people that blindly follow us will still trust the plan, whatever that plan may be, and not ask questions.
Yeah.
And then label the opponents, like Thomas Massey, who's like a co-sponsor on that resolution. Label them traitors, label them like the other party and weak, soft, whatever. And that's their strategy now, is just denigrate the opposition and make them and divide and conquer type, even within our own party.
Yeah.
So,
for those who haven't seen, I insist you watch the interview with Ambassador Mike Huckabee and Tucker Carlson for Israel's role in this. If you couldn't, there's many quotes you could pull from that. But when he asks, when Tucker asks Huckabee about the what Israel is entitled to, and Huckabee tells him that Israel is biblically entitled to take all of it across countless countries.
Yep.
That
I think all the way to the Persian Gulf, if I'm not mistaken.
All the way to the Persian Gulf, from the Nile to the Persian Gulf, sitting at the what do you call it, the foot of the river, wherever the river dumps out, where the Tigris and Euphrates meet, and the other things, and this is our representative to Israel, who's supposed to be representing us to Israel. Oh, you would confuse, as all the comments you would see on social media would confuse, like, is this guy actually support the United States?
At all.
Is he for the United States?
You'd think he was like the Israeli ambassador to the United States instead of vice versa.
And the support for the war, every survey they have, 20, maybe 30% for it. It doesn't matter if the American public doesn't. Apparently it didn't matter for getting into Iraq, because it was the largest anti-war protests apparently at the time. I insist you watch that interview. Just listen to how he talks about what we should be doing with Iran. This is pre the actual attacks on Iran.
Yep.
Recent.
Just implying that it's like, this is inevitable, more or less, was the implication that I got from that interview. It's like, it's going to happen where there's going to be war in Iran on behalf of Israel.
And so one of the things is that Trump and Lindsey Graham, senator out of South Carolina, said that there will be losses. So Lindsey Graham on February 16th was in Tel Aviv speaking to an audience. To those who may participate in this endeavor, God bless you. May God keep you safe that day should come. Could our soldiers be hit in the region? Absolutely they could. Can Iran respond if we have an all-out attack? Absolutely they can. I think the risks associated with that are far less than the risk of blinking and pulling the plug and not helping the people as you promised. We have to be good to our word. That's I can't take it out of my head with the statements he would make about the Ukrainians. He's willing to sacrifice every Ukrainian to keep the Russians at bay.
I believe somebody questioned him about whether the money that we were sending to Ukraine at the time was worth it to the American taxpayer, and what I believe his thing was saying is we're getting our money's worth because we're weakening Russia,
and we're not losing it. Yeah,
and we're not losing any people, but that completely glosses over the massive amount of Ukrainian conscripts' lives that have been lost in this conflict that is going to eventually just end in some kind of. There's going to have to be concessions made on behalf of Ukraine. They can't fight back any further than as soon as the money cuts off, they're done, and they're never taking that land back. And in the meantime, they're just sending their young men into a meat grinder, and Lindsey Graham just sees that as a money well spent.
Yeah,
horrifying. That man is a monster.
So if you were to think what Senator Lindsey Graham and some of our establishment figures, what they have in mind with fighting Iran and how many military members they're willing to sacrifice to achieve that aim. What is their aim?
Oh my God.
What are they willing to? His Christian eschatology, is it a war of Armageddon? What is this? Is this for the United States? Is this for Israel? And how many military members is he willing to sacrifice? How many people in the region? I'll get to how much he actually cares about the Iranian people, but I'd like to say what Trump's message was on February 28th. This is a few days before. My administration is taking every possible step to minimize the risk to U.S. personnel in the region. Even so, I do not make this statement lightly. The Iranian regime seeks to kill. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we are doing this not for now. We're doing this for the future. And it is a noble mission. We pray for every service member as they selflessly risk their lives to ensure that Americans and our children will never be threatened by nuclear-armed Iran. We ask God to protect all our heroes in harm's way, and we trust that with His help, the men and women of the armed forces will prevail. We have the greatest in the world, and they will prevail. I know it's up to 6. I think CENTCOM released the names. I thought I saw a few names already. Yep. But again, we're dealing with propaganda. They have every incentive to minimize the losses, killed in action or wounded, just as Iran has every desire to up the losses. And it's going to be somewhere in the middle, just like Ukraine and Russia, both sides.
Yep.
How many are they willing to sacrifice here? And I'm actually going to jump ahead because I am listening now more to they're willing to escort oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, putting U.S. ships that were out of reach of ballistic missiles now in reach. I think of Remember the Maine. I think of Lusitana for World War I. But you are almost goading them to attack, and having a ship down, more American lives lost. Maybe the justification for a declaration of war comes.
A Gulf of Tonkin.
The Gulf of Tonkin.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Like you were saying with the minimization of it, it's not going to be, they can't keep it too much of a secret in the U.S. Like, we're very connected. Like, internet and everything, our people are very connected. We're not in a massive invasion like Ukraine where a lot of numbers are going to get fudged because you don't really know if an entire village got wiped out. We're going to know every single person that dies, and I don't want that number to go up any higher. From my understanding, the individuals that died in that Kuwait base, it was cheap drones. That's going to be the wave of the future, the war technology. And if I believe I saw a release from Hegseth from the Department of War said something along the lines of we underestimated their drone capabilities in Iran, which does not bode well. If they're willing to admit that after those soldiers died in Kuwait, how bad is it actually? If the propaganda is just like, oh, we maybe underestimated this, like how bad is it actually going? Because I've heard of everything being hit from like Dubai over to Doha, all the way to Kuwait, into Iraq, all kinds of things potentially under attack from these like suicide drones. So I'm frightened for the the poor men and women downrange right now. And a lot of them, like back to the defend the guard things, a lot of those people are National Guardsmen that are deployed downrange, just sitting ducks.
Some people that know me know my unit rotates out with other National Guard units, Air Control Squadron. I've spent time at Al Dhafra. In UAE, I've spent time at Ali Al Salem. I briefly spent time at Al Udeid in Qatar. Those are air bases. Their whole purpose is for the eventual attack of Iran, but these are all in range, and you now have a president and administration, and everybody's helping him conduct this, and now puts everybody at the region in jeopardy. I don't know where else to point besides they're in over their heads. They bit off more than they can chew. They thought the Iranian regime would fall. It is obviously not the case, and it could spiral out of control. As if it's not out of control. I'm sorry.
It's like, and they speak about like the president's like, well, one of the excuses he gave weeks and weeks ago was like, well, if the Ayatollah kills one single protester, we're going in. We're now dropping bombs somewhat indiscriminately in Tehran, right? And is anybody giving a heads up to any of the protesters that may be out there? And what happens when we kill a couple hundred protesters that were technically against the regime? I think they're going to pivot and be much more sympathetic to anybody that's willing to protect them and stop the bombs from dropping on their head than any forward momentum they had made against the oppressive regime. So anything that may have been a ground up rebellion, the CIA back, whatever it may be, that may have overthrown their masters and maybe a somewhat less bombastic transfer of power could have occurred, like grassroots, something like that, maybe could have happened. I think that's completely off the table now. And we risk welcoming us as liberators type problems if we put boots on the ground that the people that we thought we were liberating are now planting roadside bombs. And I feel like we're very much following the same template of the Iraq War.
For the care, the concern for the protesters that we were supposed to go liberate. As he's pointed out, he's there for them. He's trying to help them. But his Secretary of Treasury, or Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, economic sanctions are warfare. The whole purpose of economic sanctions, when you sanction another country, is to make it harder for them to do economic activity. It's to squeeze out people who are on the margins and average people in the society. I'll just read Scott Bessent's thing. This is what we do in every country. I mean, this is what cripples North Korea. This was what's been crippling Iran. But he has stepped up sanctions. I'll just read what he's so proud of. This is Scott Bessent. These intended effects of the sanctions on Iran were designed to collapse its already buckling economy in hopes it would lead to a mass uprising that would could be exploited for regime change. When asked, do sanctions actually work on Iran, Bessent replied, if you look at the speech I gave at the Economic Club of New York last March, I said I believe the Iranian currency was on the verge of collapse, that if I were an Iranian citizen, I would take my money out. President Trump ordered Treasury and our OFAC division to put maximum pressure on Iran, and it's worked because in December, their economy collapsed. We saw a major bank go under. The central banks had started to print money. There is a dollar shortage. They are not able to get the imports, and this is why the people took to the streets. He added, this is economic statecraft, no shots fired, and things are moving in a very positive way here as you're ruining people's lives. You put these together, Pelosi had something to say, but these people don't, they're proud of sanctions.
Yeah.
They enjoy hurting these people, and they talk about, sorry, go ahead.
It's like the political term for we're going to starve their lowest 10%, like just starve them to death. That's the reality of what a sanction is. They think when they say it on the news media, they say it like it's some kind of we're going to reach into the Ayatollah's bank account and take money away or something. That's how they phrase it. That's how they frame it. And they know the American people don't really fully understand what the downstream consequences of these sanctions are. But that is what it is. The poorest starve, and they're going to get their uprising on the backs of a bunch of dead innocent people.
There was something truthful that Trump said after he was befriending Al-Jilani, that he was going to lift the sanctions this year because they've been crippling the country. Okay, so what was going on before that? What were they doing? Crippling. It was nice to hear because if you were paying attention, this is what we were doing. We were trying, as bad as the Assad regime is, we will make it so much worse, and we'll make you worth it, that for your risk, you'll calculate that it might be worth it to openly rebel against the government because life is so unbearable here.
And every nation that we sanction, they were talking about the axis of evil earlier. There was a time where Iran and the Soviet Union and or more or less, like back in the 50s and stuff like that, they were actively hostile against each other. And then over the time, because our hostility towards Russia, or the Soviet Union, then Russia, and then hostility towards Iran once the Ayatollah came to power and they exiled the Shah, they have been growing together because of our sanctions and our penalties and our hostile posturing in the region by just deploying bases encircling all these countries. So countries that were previously enemies, and we could have potentially leveraged that, made peace, right, like with like one faction or another, and like made world peace against whoever the actual threats are, terrorists, whatever they may be, the Bin Ladens of the planet. Instead, we just drive these massive powers together. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Syria, like are all working together, and now we're just trying to like whack-a-mole, take them out one by one before they finally had enough, right? And then the nukes start flying. Who knows, right? Like China's watching what's happening right now in Iran. Iran was like, I think they were getting 10% of their oil from Iran.
Something.
And there's like 5% from Venezuela. So now we've reduced China's oil supply by 15%. And if you remember World War II, the reason the Japanese like invaded, I think it was the Aleutians and then bombed Pearl Harbor, was because the United States started cutting off the oil supply to Japan.
They were increasing the pressure.
Yeah.
And that's all in the Naval Archives. You can listen to Secretary Henry Stimson and what he had to say about the eventual Japanese-American War and getting entry into World War II.
It didn't come from nowhere, is my point. It's all about that, the CIA calls it blowback, right? And I think it was like Scott Horton just had a tweet that was after the mass shooting in Austin, like right after we bombed Iran, there was a mass shooting, and the guy claimed that he was like supporting the Iran regime, that mass shooter, and he called it backblast, because whereas blowback is something that you can see down like a decade down the line comes back to bite us in the ass, a backblast is something we could have easily predicted and happened immediately, and that's exactly what we're seeing.
Yeah. And that humanitarian language of liberating those people, remind that 315 per cost of war, conservative estimates, due to direct deaths for Iraq, our invasion of liberating those people, 315,000 people were killed between 2003 and 2019. That's not indirect deaths, that's not malnutrition, that's not famine, disease, that's not just economic hardship and having to relocate refugees. Afghanistan, it was about 46,000, which is small compared to Iraq. But again, these are direct deaths. These are direct deaths. These are, but yeah, smaller country. Libya, I mean, just from our short time in 2011 with the bombing campaign, 7,000 to 15,000 that day. And today, that is a destabilized nation. That is not a nation.
It is not a country. It's a failed state with slave markets in the streets.
That is, so we really, I mean, you can go on the montage. It's cruel. We're liberating them, and there's no concern after the fact. Syria, 207,000 direct deaths since our involvement from 2011 to up till recently. That is not the hundreds of thousands that are indirect deaths.
They were beheading people in the street. The al-Shara, also known as al-Jawlani, his men were still beheading Alawites in the street, and then they went in after the Druze down in southeast, and then I think Israel actually stepped in on behalf of the Druze and bombed the Jawlani's men that were out in the streets, like decapitating these people.
I feel like every time we meet, we have to talk about who was here on Veterans Day last year.
Him,
al-Jawlani, and who was he? Like,
a former head chopper, Bin Ladenite, that he was held in a detainment camp in Iraq. He was operating in Iraq at the same time I was there, and he was doing roadside bombing. He was teaching the insurgency, how to plant roadside bombs. He had come over from Syria, his nation, to fight Americans, specifically with the explicit reason of killing Americans. And when he was asked on Frontline, they embedded with him back during like a little lull in the Syrian civil war. It was almost like a puff piece, but they asked him outright, it's like, do you regret anything you did? And he's like, what I did was for my people. And it's like, so no. He doesn't even regret killing Americans.
No, and so Trump gives him all those niceties. on Veterans Day. And David Petraeus in that last interview, I don't remember the date of it, not too long ago, because this was all recent. David Petraeus, Iraqi commander, says, I'm a real big fan of you. I'm a fan of your work.
Disgusting.
I did recently hear that Iran was responsible for the IDs in Iraq against American troops. I'm going to read from Matthew Ho, the State Department official, DOD expert. The lack of shame exhibited by the U.S. government as it lies about Iraqi improvised explosive devices, attacks that killed thousands of American service members to justify its new war in Iran is breathtaking. To begin with, the majority of U.S. service members killed and wounded in occupation of Iraq were killed by Sunni resistance groups, not Shia resistance groups. Sunni groups accounted for more than 80% of American deaths. These Sunni groups did not receive any support from Iran. These Sunni groups, like the Taliban in Afghanistan, did get a great deal of support from persons and institutions throughout Sunni countries in the Middle East, especially from the Gulf monarchies, Saudi Arabia chief among them. Yet in Washington, D.C.'s calculus, these states do not have the blood on their hands that Iran does, even as 4 out of 5 Americans were killed by Iraqi Sunni groups. The Iranian role was dwarfed by organic Iraqi resistance to occupation.
Exactly.
And sectarian community commitments to one side or another in intra-Iraqi fighting. Both Sunni and Shia groups that were killing Americans, along with their supporters, were explained away by Saddam Hussein's loyalists, criminals, jihadists, co-opted, desperate and jobless, dead-enders, or nearly anything other than as men who were picking up a rifle because their country was occupied and their communities and families were threatened.
They always say the same thing. It's like you could never occupy the U.S. because there's like a gun behind every blade of grass, I believe is an expression from World War II.
Yeah.
The same attitude exists everywhere. No one wants their country occupied. This greeted as liberators was nonsense. It was propaganda from day one. Anybody who repeats it from here into however this Iran conflict goes is lying. They're lying through their teeth because they want to make it seem like what we're doing is for the benefit of the people that live there.
And it requires that people don't understand that there is even just a general difference between Sunnis and Shia. It just has to be glazed over. You have to not know and just, oh yeah, there were a lot of IEDs.
Yep.
Oh, those were people over there. One of the things with Defend the Guard is we're declaring war because someone has attacked us, has hurt us at home. That natural inclination to fight off someone, an occupying power in Iraq, how can you say to that person defending their homeland, their neighborhood, when there's occupational forces that are there?
I don't know. It's I can't imagine being in the the shoes of those people. Like after I've walked the streets of Iraq and I interacted with the populace. Some were grateful that we were there, but how many of them were lying with a fake smile, right? Because in the same neighborhoods that I walked and we were shaking hands, any other week we were receiving mortar fire. There was IEDs. My squad was hit by a suicide VB IED. Same people, same neighborhoods. Like who's friends, who's not. Like some of these people just don't want us there.
Right. So we have changing parameters from it's a few days of aerial campaign to now it's going to be a few weeks.
Yeah.
We're being it's like a tantrum of it's going to be a few weeks. We were only saying a few days, but it's really going to be a few weeks. And then it's going to be heavy strikes to now heavier strikes. It's not boots on the ground are not off the table, but I do not see that unless we have a ship sunk and we lose hundreds, if not thousands, of sailors.
My fear is that it goes the Syrian route. Right, I'm hearing that we were potentially training up Kurdish insurgents that'll be coming in from the west. And that's exactly the way the Syrian thing went down. Is we trained quote unquote moderate rebels. We helped the Kurds. Eventually, the moderate rebels broke off and formed ISIS, but this could potentially go that exact same disastrous way. Like we armed the Taliban against the Russians, right? And then found ourselves fighting them 30 years later. We helped Saddam fight Iranians and then found ourselves fighting him 10 years later, twice.
Yeah, there was a dual containment thing in the 80s of Iran versus Iraq for the protection for Israel's projects. And we had no problem funding to a greater degree Saddam Hussein against the Iranians, even supplying the chemical weapons that we forbid him to have in the 90s after the Gulf War, and who Oliver North was smuggling the whole thing with money for weapons down to fight the Sandinistas. This was the Contras down in Latin America.
Yep.
But we had no problem making that last a very brutal war, to which Henry Kissinger at the time said, too bad they can't both lose.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It was, I think, one of the bloodiest conflicts post World War II was Iran versus Iraq. There was like 500,000 dead or something in that conflict, something insane. It was trench warfare similar to World War I, just prolonged.
Yeah. We're going to be closing this now. What could we say to residents in New Hampshire about Defend the Guard?
Defend the Guard's current status is it's going to get it by the time you've seen this, the Senate will have already voted on it. It's my prediction is it's going to fail. I just ask that it gets a roll call vote. I will be filing it again this fall for next year, and I will continue this fight on and on. I think as the specter of the Iranian war is hovering out there, I think a lot of people are going to start paying a lot better attention to foreign policy, and this bill, I hope, motivates some individuals to get involved and back it. That'd be great.
That would be great. For state legislature, is this not an opportunity to ensure that we're not putting our National Guard troops in harm's way unless there's a justifiable war to send them to, because we're an imminent threat, we're in danger of something has happened to us? It's also the constitutionality, as you keep pointing out. This has all been unconstitutional, and where are we any better for any of this?
No.
But a lot of lives have been lost, both American service members and people in those countries. Tom, any last words?
It's like, even from a right-wing perspective, these wars, like the life lost are supposed to be pro-life, and then the refugee crisis that occurs, like that we're seeing all throughout Europe. It's people from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. Imagine the amount of people coming from Iran if that becomes fully destabilized. Bigger than Iraq and Syria, bigger than Afghanistan, and the amount of people that could flood anywhere else. And Lord knows what's going to happen if a bunch of angry, Sunni Shiites end up in certain areas. From a right-wing perspective, we should not be advocating for anything that could result in a refugee crisis.
If we cared anything about the people of Iran, we would, one, lift the sanctions,
yes,
and two, not be starting a war that will affect all of them negatively.
Yeah.
Thank you.